Hi there guys, I hope you have had a good day. Now, obviously we know that Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren could possibly work together down the line because obviously Frank Warren was interested in joining with Matchroom to make a fight series between Matchroom fighters and Queensberry fighters. Now that was kind of interesting because we knew that Conor Benn could have been fighting Chris Jenkins at Fight Camp, I believe, but it didn't happen. I mean, the money was agreed, both fighters were happy, Chris Jenkins was over the moon with that deal. Yet the fight still didn't happen, although that is on the fight cards that Frank Warren, I believe, is proposing for a merger. Not a merger, but ultimately like them joining forces for a series. That fight was on there as a possible matchup between Queensberry fighters and Matchroom fighters. And Eddie Hearn said that he is interested, but also there was a phone call between Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn. Apparently, Eddie Hearn gave an interview to IFL, I believe, and he was kind of slating Frank Warren and saying that, yeah, we'll work with them, but they don't need to. And saying all of that, he said after he got out of that interview, he had a message from Frank Warren. He called him straight away, and they had a brief conversation. This is what Eddie Hearn had to say about the conversation between him and Frank Warren, the first one ever. I checked my voicemail. He had left me a message. I gave him a buzz and just said, listen, once we get Fight Camp out the way, we'll have a chat, no problem having a bite to eat with him. Lots to discuss, lots of issues to get out of the way. We're a million miles away from making any fights, but no problem having a bit of grub and discussing it. So we'll see what happens in September. More than happy to discuss some of the fights, and we will do. We will get together and discuss it. Now, the fights that were being proposed by Queensberry between a Queensberry fighter and a Matchroom fighter were Edwards versus Yafai and Gorman versus Allen, Shiraz versus Cheeseman, Sharp versus Barrett, Jenkins versus Ben, Dubois versus Dillian White, Yard versus Buatsi, great fight, Joyce versus Chisora, and Williams versus Andrade. Now, White Dubois cannot happen because, well, it can do, but ultimately Dillian White has Alexander Povetkin next, then hopefully he's going to get his mandatory opportunity at the WBC World Champion. Yard, Buatsi, that's the main one. Incredible fight. Joyce, Chisora's obviously fighting Usyk. And Andrade versus Williams, I believe, has been ordered anyway. And Edwards versus Yafai, great, but I believe that Eddie Hearn is keen to get Yafai in a world title shot. So we don't know at the moment on that one. Gorman Allen, great fight. Shiraz versus Cheeseman, good fight as well, but maybe Cheeseman could be tempted by an Eggington rematch. We don't know at the moment. But ultimately, that's a fight that is there. Sharp versus Barrett, great fight as well. And Jenkins versus Ben, great fight that possibly should be happening anyway, because obviously there was a big offer and a good offer that Jenkins was happy with, and his team as well. But ultimately, the fight did not happen. So there is a possibility that that fight will still go ahead. I believe that it could have been ordered anyway. So that fight might happen regardless anyway. So I believe this is a good thing. It's positive. Queensberry fighters versus Matchroom fighters. It could be a series that could go ahead. There are many fights that at the moment are not possible, but still, there are fights on there that have been ordered and fights on there that should and could happen. It's just whether they get this over the line. Fight Camp is priority for Matchroom at the moment, and obviously Queensberry have their own fights to deal with, but ultimately, this is something that could be explored going forwards. There has been dialogue between Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren. Now, Frank Warren has since responded to Eddie Hearn, obviously saying before he knew he had a phone call from Frank Warren, that obviously Eddie Hearn was making jokes about them needing Matchroom, and he could easily just say, no, go away, I'm going to do my own thing. If you need us, we don't need you, so just go and do your thing, we will do ours. He was also taking the mick out of Queensberry Promotions' numbers and obviously their return with boxing. But obviously then the phone call happened, and maybe Eddie Hearn, I don't know if he regretted saying that, but ultimately there was a phone call there and Frank Warren was reaching out to Eddie Hearn. But Frank Warren has explained that the legal letters were obviously no fault of his. He said the complaints came from Andy Ayling, who previously worked for Matchroom, interestingly enough, but now works with Queensberry, but he is an independent license holder, so he has his own right to make queries about the show. So it wasn't linked to Queensberry, apparently, according to Frank Warren. Now, Frank Warren did also say, check your voicemail, because he wanted to have a chat. That's already happened, as we know. But ultimately there was back and forth between Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren. There has been for years, but maybe they can put that behind them and make these big fights. Also, Frank Warren said he does not run his Twitter accounts, and anything that is said between Frank Warren, Matchroom, and Eddie Hearn on Twitter is not him, although he did say he was making this statement personally. Just to clarify, he is not trying to undermine what Matchroom are doing with Fight Camp, and he hopes that he can still work with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. He is happy to take Eddie Hearn out for a bite to eat so they can talk about this, make these big fights happen. That sounds pretty good to me. Anyway, guys, what are your thoughts on this? Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe if you are new. Thanks, guys.